This is vanilla ice cream under a microscope, and one of these 4 brands looked completely different from the others. I bought one of the cheapest vanilla ice creams in the store, 3 premium brands, and decided to find out what the hell we're actually paying for. I'm comparing their ingredients. I'm measuring how much ice cream you actually get instead of air, watching them how they melt, and putting every one of them under the microscope. Based on the labels alone, I thought I already knew which one would win, but one premium brand didn't perform the way I expected, and the budget ice cream may not be the one you should worry about. So before another carton of vanilla ice cream costs us $8 damn, let's find out which one is actually worth buying and which one is mostly selling us a fancy container. Let's open the first case file.
Tillamook has become one of the most respected names in premium ice cream, earning a reputation for using more cream and less air than many of its competitors. Those are bold claims, and today, we're going to find out if the evidence supports them. Right away, the ingredient list looks refreshingly simple. Cream, skim milk, sugar, egg yolks, vanilla extract, and a handful of stabilizers designed to keep the texture smooth and consistent. There's nothing here that immediately raises any red flags. In fact, based on these ingredients alone, I have high expectations. Every claim on the label leads to this moment. Now it's time to find out if the microscope tells the same story. If you're wondering why everything looks blue, it's because I added a stain called methylene blue. It makes tiny structures much easier to see. At 40 times magnification, we're getting our first look at Tillamook's overall structure. Those white circles are tiny droplets of milk fat suspended throughout the ice cream. The first thing that catches my eye is how balanced everything looks. The fat droplets are spread evenly across the sample instead of collecting into large pockets. That's exactly what I'd expect from an ice cream with a smooth, well-blended mixture. So far, Tillamook is making a very strong first impression, but let's see what happens as we zoom in even closer. At 100 times magnification, we can start to see even more detail. One thing you'll probably notice is that everything seems to be flowing like a slow-moving stream. That's not the ice cream moving on its own. The tiny droplets are simply being carried by the thin layer of liquid beneath the cover slip. As we zoom in, the fat droplets become much easier to distinguish, and they're still spread remarkably evenly throughout the sample. That's another good sign that the ingredients have blended together into a smooth, stable emulsion. Now let's push the magnification even further. At 400 times magnification, this is where things start to get really interesting. The fat droplets are still evenly distributed throughout the sample, creating a remarkably smooth and consistent structure. That's exactly what I'd hoped to see after reading Tillamook's ingredient list. When a company says they're using more cream and taking the time to create a rich, stable emulsion, this is what I'd expect it to look like under the microscope. It doesn't prove that expensive always means better, but so far, Tillamook's premium price is matching what we're seeing on the slide. Let's see if that still holds true at 1,000 times magnification. At 1,000 times magnification, we're seeing details that are completely invisible to the naked eye. The fat droplets still appear remarkably uniform, and the overall structure remains smooth and consistent. Even at this magnification, I'm not seeing signs that the emulsion is breaking down or separating. That tells me the ingredients are working together exactly the way I'd expect from a well-made premium ice cream. Based on everything we've seen under the microscope, Tillamook has absolutely lived up to its reputation. But the real question is, will the other brands hold up this well?
You guys, you know how this channel works, right? So HTPOW sent me this automatic mason jar vacuum sealer. And you know me, if someone sends me something to test, I'm gonna test it real hard, because I'm not putting something on this channel unless I actually believe it's worth showing you. Let me open the box here, and I'm gonna let you guys know, the company is really good to work for. I mean, I asked for a couple of these mason jar sealers, and they're very prompt, they're very courteous, very transparent. And let me show you guys something. I have a mason jar right here, half full of water. I am going to put the mason jar lid on top, just the lid, if I can do it right. And then the mason jar sealer goes on top like this. Super easy. And there's a button you push on top. Push that. And then a few seconds later, it will or should provide an awesome seal. So I wanted to test it, and the results came in. It's done. It easily comes off the top like that. And watch this, guys. Perfect seal without the screw top. I left a link in the description down below. If you like the HTPOW, click the link and you won't be sorry.
Next up, Great Value is the least expensive ice cream in today's investigation, costing about half the price of some of the premium brands. At a glance, it looks almost identical to Tillamook, but once you turn the carton around, the ingredient list starts telling a different story. The question is, will we actually see that difference under the microscope? At 40 times magnification, we're getting our first look at Great Value's overall structure. Those white circles are tiny droplets of milk fat suspended throughout the ice cream. Milk fat is one of the biggest reasons ice cream tastes rich and creamy, so it's one of the first things I'm looking at during this investigation. Right away, Great Value looks very different than Tillamook. There are noticeably fewer visible fat droplets spread throughout the sample, giving it a much simpler appearance. For a budget ice cream, that's not entirely surprising. Manufacturers have to hit a much lower price point, and that often means making different formulation choices than a premium brand. You can already see that these two ice creams are telling very different stories. Let's see what happens as we zoom in. At 100 times magnification, that difference becomes even more obvious. Compared to Tillamook, there are still noticeably fewer visible fat droplets throughout the sample. That doesn't necessarily mean Great Value is a bad ice cream, but it does suggest this product was built differently from the start. When manufacturers are trying to sell a carton for nearly half the price of a premium brand, they're making different decisions about ingredients, processing, or both. Under the microscope, we're finally starting to see the results of those decisions. Let's push the magnification even further. At 400 times magnification, the difference is becoming hard to ignore. Compared to Tillamook, there are still noticeably fewer visible fat droplets, giving the sample a much simpler appearance. For a budget ice cream, that's not entirely surprising, and now we're finally starting to see why these products don't all cost the same. Let's see what 1,000 times magnification reveals. At 1,000 times magnification, the verdict is becoming pretty clear. Compared to Tillamook, Great Value has maintained a much simpler structure from start to finish. For a budget ice cream, that's not entirely surprising, but the next brand might tell a very different story. Next up is Ben & Jerry's. At 40 times magnification, Ben & Jerry's immediately stands out. Again, those white circles are tiny droplets of milk fat, and compared to Great Value, there are noticeably more of them spread throughout the sample. That's exactly what I'd expect from a premium ice cream that's built around richness and flavor. Right away, Ben & Jerry's looks much closer to Tillamook than it does to the budget brand. Let's zoom in and see if that trend continues. At 100 times magnification, that first impression is holding up. The sample is still packed with visible fat droplets, giving it a much richer appearance than Great Value. So far, Ben & Jerry's is looking much more like a premium ice cream than a budget one. Let's keep zooming in and see if that holds true at 400 times magnification. At 400 times magnification, Ben & Jerry's continues to impress. The sample still looks dense and well blended with a rich structure that's much closer to Tillamook than Great Value. So far, everything I'm seeing is exactly what I'd expect from a premium ice cream. Let's see if 1,000 times magnification reveals anything different. At 1,000 times magnification, Ben & Jerry's has stayed remarkably consistent from start to finish. The sample continues to look rich, dense, and well-structured, with plenty of visible fat droplets throughout. So far, it's living up to what I'd expect from a premium ice cream. Now let's see if Häagen-Dazs can raise the bar even higher. At 40 times magnification, Häagen-Dazs immediately catches my attention. The sample is packed with tiny milk fat droplets, creating a much denser appearance than any of the ice creams we've looked at so far. That's exactly what I'd expect from a brand that's built its reputation around rich, simple ingredients. Right away, Häagen-Dazs looks incredibly well organized under the microscope. Let's zoom in and see if that impression holds up. At 100 times magnification, that first impression is only getting stronger. The sample is still packed with tiny fat droplets, creating an incredibly dense and uniform appearance. Compared to the other ice creams we've tested, Häagen-Dazs is looking exceptionally well structured under the microscope. Let's keep zooming in and see if it can hold on to that lead. At 400 times magnification, Häagen-Dazs continues to stand out. The sample remains incredibly dense and uniform, with tiny fat droplets spread throughout the entire field. Again, I'm seeing exactly what I'd expect from a premium ice cream. Let's take one final look at 1,000 times magnifications. At 1,000 times magnification, Häagen-Dazs has been remarkably consistent from start to finish. The sample remains incredibly dense and well organized, with tiny fat droplets distributed throughout the field. Based on everything I've seen under the microscope, Häagen-Dazs has certainly made a strong case for itself. Now it's time to compare all four brands and find out which one actually comes out on top. Okay folks, we've compared the ingredients and we've seen how each ice cream is built under the microscope. If these ice creams are built differently, do they respond differently when they're exposed to the exact same amount of heat? This isn't about deciding which one tastes better or which one is healthier. It's simply a stress test to see if the structural differences we observed under the microscope translate into different behavior under heat. All right, Ben & Jerry's is up first. I honestly thought this thing would start melting almost immediately, but it didn't. It held together for a lot longer than I expected. Instead of just collapsing, the flame actually left a burn mark across the top before the ice cream really started giving way. That's interesting. Let's see if the other brands do the same thing. Now it's Häagen-Dazs' turn. This one started reacting to the heat much sooner than Ben & Jerry's. The surface softened pretty quickly, and before long, the flame left another dark burn mark across the top. So even though Häagen-Dazs looked incredibly dense under the microscope, it didn't resist the heat nearly as long as Ben & Jerry's did. Let's see where the remaining brands land. All right, here's great value. I had a feeling this one wasn't going to do very well. It's the cheapest ice cream here, and companies don't hit those prices by accident. The moment the flame touched it, it started melting almost instantly, and then the smoke started pouring off the top. Now you know why I wanted to do this burn test. Makes you think of what's in this stuff, right? Finally, we've got Tillamook. This one didn't waste any time either. It started melting almost right away, finishing second behind Great Value. It left a burn mark on top, but nowhere near the amount of smoke we saw from the budget brand. Now let's see how all four stack up with the weight. One quick thing before we compare the numbers. I couldn't find Tillamook in a 1-pint container like the other brands, so I had to buy the 1.5 quart version instead. After weighing the entire container, I simply divided the total weight by 3 to calculate the equivalent weight of a single pint. That gives us a fair apples-to-apples comparison across all four brands. So 762 grams divided by 3 equals 254 grams total for Tillamook. All right, Häagen-Dazs is up. Let's see what we've got. 261 grams, that makes it the heaviest ice cream we've tested so far. And honestly, that lines up perfectly with what we saw under the microscope. Häagen-Dazs had the densest, most tightly packed structure of the entire group. Less air, more ice cream packed into the same amount of space. Now let's see how Great Value compares. 203 grams. That's the lightest ice cream in the entire lineup. And honestly, that's exactly what the microscope was hinting at. Great Value had the simplest structure we saw, and now it's also the lightest by a pretty wide margin. Once again, both tests are telling the same story. All right, Ben & Jerry's is up. Let's see what we've got. 340 grams. Wow, I was not expecting that. That makes Ben & Jerry's the heaviest ice cream in the entire lineup. It also explains what we saw under the microscope. The sample looked rich, dense, and tightly packed. And now the scale is telling the exact same story.
Okay, here's my biggest critic on YouTube right here. This is the ultimate test. Which one will he go to, you guys? Boom, right there. He went to Häagen-Dazs. So what's that tell you? I know it's bad for my dog. He was only here for maybe 10 seconds and then I removed everything. So no worries. Anyways, there you have it. That's the ultimate true test right there. That's Frankie. All right, guys, welcome back. Case is closed after 4 different investigations. The evidence is pretty hard to ignore. What do you think? Some of these brands earned their reputation, don't get me wrong, and some really didn't. So if I had to buy just one, if I'm on an island somewhere, after everything we tested today, it would be this guy. And you know what? My favorite was Ben & Jerry's. But after seeing the test, and not because of just one test, it's because it performed consistently across the board throughout the entire investigation. From the ingredients, to the microscope, to the heat test, and finally, the weight test. That was a biggie. So every experiment helped tell the story today. If you'd like to perform these same experiments yourself at home or in your garage, or learn how I prepare and photograph my samples, check out the official Visual Scientist Field Lab book. It's linked below. and every purchase helps support this channel and future investigations. Listen, if there's another food you'd like to see put under the microscope, leave it in the comments below, you guys. I answer every comment. Case is closed. Take care of yourself and others.